Hope you had a great weekend, my friends. Today is Monday, the 6th of July. And, usually Mondays are a slow start to the week. I usually do a shorter episode, and I might even today as well. But, man, have I ever got some great stuff that I want to play for you on this episode of Scott Fox After 9. Before I get too far into it, a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, Friday night, Burlington, Ontario. I had dinner with my beautiful girlfriend, Diana, and Silent Date Guy and Silent Date Girl. I got to tell you, they're doing great. But holy cow, do I have some updates for you. So after a sufficient number of cocktails, I did convince at least one of them to let me do another Silent Date update. If you have not heard the Silent Date series, a lot of people seem to enjoy it. I think it's a fun story. There is a playlist on Spotify called Silent Date Update. And if you go to that playlist, you can even subscribe to it. Every time I put out an episode in that series, it'll be in that playlist. And you can get the whole series. I think there's like 3-4 hours of audio in there. If you want to hear all of the past Silent Date updates, you can look for that podcast playlist on Spotify. What else can I tell you? Oh, over the weekend, it came down that Rob Serjanik, the Ontario member of provincial parliament for Ajax, is withdrawing from the Ontario Liberal leadership race. Now, I am not a Liberal in any way. Well, maybe a couple of ways, but I'm not a Liberal. But nonetheless, I thought that if the Liberals were going to have any shot at competing for the Premier's office in the next provincial election, Rob was certainly one of their best bets. So disappointing that Rob has suspended his campaign, but congratulations to him for putting his name out there, for trying to make a difference. I like Rob. He's like a common sense liberal, and you don't meet many of those every day anyway. So congratulations to Rob on the campaign that he ran. I am disappointed that he is pulling out of the race, but I have no doubt that there are big things in his political future. Over the weekend, Team Canada eliminated at the World Cup of Soccer, out in the round of 16. And it's disappointing. We played a great first half against Morocco. The second half, though, it was almost like we changed the strategy. It was weird because I think people expected Alphonso Davies was going to get into the game, and he just sat there on the sidelines, not really doing anything. That was frustrating. Canada lost 3-0. They are out. You know where the congratulations are coming from, though, in addition to regular Canadians all across the country, is the other teams. In Canada, we don't get as many major league franchises as the Americans have. So when we get like one basketball team, like the Raptors, they're Canada's team. When we get one baseball team, they're Canada's team. And Canada's baseball team was talking about the soccer team on the weekend. Here is Jays coach, John Snyder.
On a happier note, hey, congrats to the Canadian World Cup team and Coach Marsh making it as far or farther than anyone has. They had a good run, and it was fun to watch them. So from the Canadian team to the Canadian team on 4th of July, congrats to the soccer team.
Very good. I like that kind of cooperation. That is exactly what we need to see more of here in this country. By the way, what's going on with the Blue Jays? Shut out again yesterday. They haven't scored a run in 24 innings. What's going on with the Blue Jays? It's crazy. Over the weekend, it was yesterday, actually, I am so blown away by this accomplishment. Canada's gold medal winning Olympic swimmer, Summer McIntosh, was competing in Montreal, and she set a new world record for females in the 200-meter backstroke. Here's a little bit of Summer McIntosh after she broke the record.
I mean, to be honest, as soon as I dove in, I felt absolutely incredible, and that the crowd just got my adrenaline going, and, Bob told me to go out fast. I don't know what I was out in, but I went out pretty fast, and I think I just held on very well. So, yeah, it was done very well, and it's a great way to start off trials.
Does this swimming world realize how challenging this record is? I said the perfect race. You probably say there's never any perfect race, but it has stood for this long.
Yeah, this is probably, in my opinion, one of the hardest world records in the books, on the women's side at least, and that's always been a really big goal of mine. I remember a long time ago, one of my old coaches said that, one day this will be mine, and to now break it is it's very surreal. I think even when I went the 2:01.9, I knew that 0.18 to get is still a little bit to go, and, I just kept pushing and pushing, and that really motivated me after Worlds to, get that with Bob, and now I'm here, and I'm so happy.
What an accomplishment. Congratulations, Summer McIntosh, a new world record. I was thinking about this morning. I was talking about it on my radio show. I don't know if there is a better. Yeah, hot take incoming. Feel free to flood me with your DMs if you want. I don't know if there is a better individual athlete in this country than Summer McIntosh. There. I said it. Is there an individual athlete better than Summer McIntosh? 3 gold medals at the last Olympics. Now she just set the world record in the women's 200-meter butterfly. Unbelievable. I also don't know why the butterfly is a thing. I don't know why people swim like that. It doesn't seem like the most practical or efficient way to do it, but here we are. Friends, coming up on this episode of The Pod, I'm going to be talking a little bit about this new pipeline. I'm also watching to see if anything comes down while I'm recording from the Prime Minister. This is going to be a big week. He is on his way to the G7 summit where there is virtually no chance that he can avoid Donald Trump. But on the way, he's going to stop on the East Coast, and he's going to make an announcement that Canada is buying submarines. Listen, our government is spending a hell of a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of spending to get to 5% of GDP and meet our new NATO spending target. I just don't know if spending over $100 billion on submarines is really the best way to spend $100 billion. How many fighter jets could we get for that? How much submarine warfare is really happening right now? Do we need more ships on top of the water before we put ships under the water? It's a weird thing. I don't know. I'm not a military expert by any means, but if we're talking about defending our sovereignty, $100 million, and we won't even have them for a decade, I still think we should go back to my suggestion from a couple of weeks ago. We should just be buying used from the Americans. Then we could actually have an aircraft carrier. Then we could actually have some of the military might that our allies have. We're decades and decades away from getting there because we haven't been spending all along. So if we bought used from the Americans, it would put more money in their pockets to go and buy the latest and greatest. They've got to defend us anyway. We could take on some of their stuff that's near the end of life. And give it a good life. Take care of it. Contracts back and forth for maintenance and stuff. There's all kinds of ways we could work with the Americans on this to make sure that we have those military assets here in Canada. 10 subs that we won't have for 10 years. I don't know. That's a weird one to me. But anyway, let's talk about the other big expenditure that Ottawa has announced. Just before the weekend, we found out we're probably, maybe, kind of building a pipeline. But not like anybody expected. I want to go to an interview that aired this weekend on the CBC. It was on Power and Politics, and it was an interview with Catherine Cullen and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. This is only about 1 minute and 15 seconds long, but I think this is very telling.
I want to focus in still on the private company here, Pembina. When you read the news release that they've put out going along with this, they are interested in this 10% stake, but they make it clear there is a lot of caution around this. They're still evaluating the plan. Is it possible they could choose to walk away, that this could become entirely a public project?
Well, I hope not. I mean, I think that what we've been looking for and what private industry has been looking for is some indication that governments can work together to clear regulatory hurdles so projects can get built. You have to remember the environment we're walking into. We have an environment where the Northern Gateway project got all of its approvals and was canceled. And then we had the Keystone XL project that was approved and in construction, and then a presidential permit from the U.S. was canceled. And then we had $1 billion spent on an Energy East regulatory process they pulled the plug on because they couldn't see the way through to the finish line. So you can well imagine why it is that pipeline proponents are a little bit nervous based on the past 10 years of history. And so when you have that kind of history, it takes commitment on both the federal and provincial government's part to de-risk these projects and make sure that that industry has some confidence that they can be built in a timely way. It's going to be the proof is going to be in what we go through over the next year. But I'm pleased that the Prime Minister seems willing to work with Alberta to make that happen.
What does de-risk these projects mean? What was offered to Pembina? Did we guarantee that their investment will have a return on investment? Because that's not how investment works, really. And you know, when the question was, is there a chance that Pembina could walk away? The Premier's answer was, I hope not. Well, I hope not, too. How much are we spending on this? Hey, I agree we need a pipeline, but I think there were other ways to do this. Let me just put that out there. You know who I do want to hear from, though, is Dan McTeague. Dan is the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. He is a very, very smart man. He is a former Liberal member of Parliament, and he is a real good guy. I've sat and had many chats with Dan, and I always enjoy hearing his perspective. So the guy from Canadians for Affordable Energy, what does he think about this pipeline?
Well, it's summertime, a good time to kick off announcements made in Ottawa and around the country so that no one really pays attention to them. But I certainly was, and I think many of us here will want to spend a bit more time focusing on the MOU turning into a pipeline to the west coast of British Columbia from Alberta, transforming and being recommended into the Major Projects Office, which Carney announced to much fanfare about a year and a half ago. No projects have really been approved at this point, save and except those projects that already exist and have already been announced in the past. But we'll see where this one goes, because we know that the country needs to build more pipelines. The fact is that the federal government seems willing and completely incapable of trying to change the very things that have made it uneconomical and unpalatable for most people to want to invest in new pipeline in Canada. So here we have the Premier of Alberta, Premier of British Columbia, announced in Vancouver, along with the Prime Minister, that they're going to refer this project, which could be 1 million barrels a day, with some support. Not all, but some support. I see that Pembina is going to be one of the ones that is going to take a 10% position, but it leaves a number of questions unanswered, particularly from the net zero test that has been imposed first and foremost on any new pipeline. We understand Indigenous reconciliation and those factors. They will be addressed, as they have been for quite some time, and we applaud that. The problem is getting this thing built and what it's going to cost. It's easy to say that we'll proceed with getting this project ahead, but unless there's a sponsor, no one's going to build anything. More importantly, the economics is critical. I want people to understand that when you have Canadian oil at $56 a barrel, while what WTI is selling at about $68 a barrel, is a $12 difference, or a $12 advantage that Canada has. But that advantage will be quickly eroded away because the federal government insists not only on maintaining a tanker ban, Bill C-49, it's also looking to ensure that what is in the pipeline is both decarbonized and pays a substantial carbon tax. All those factors make Western Canadians Select at $56 a barrel today very uneconomical, and it'll make it more expensive than WTI. So yeah, you might have Asian markets and you might have pretend that people want to buy these things, but it comes down to dollars and cents. People are looking at fundamentals. They're not looking at whether it's decarbonized or not, which no oil in the world is, including, by the way, Norway's off the North Sea. So it really makes the point about yesterday's announcement. That is the announcement on July the 2nd between the premiers and the Prime Minister, no further ahead than where we were. And it suggests that somehow it could get approved. That's great. But who's going to pay? And not only pay to build it, but who is going to pay to actually buy Canadian oil, which is now going from $56 a barrel potentially to $70 a barrel, with the cost of decarbonization or underground storage, sequestration, CCUS, they refer to carbon capture and underground storage, as well as a carbon tax, that has been slightly reduced, but it's still going to make it highly uneconomical.
Okay, great words there from Dan McTeague. You can visit him at affordableenergy.ca if you want to hear more. I think Dan, if I'm reading between the lines here, is in a similar spot to me, a little conflicted here, because while we do want another pipeline, we need another pipeline, Canadians agree that this is something that we've got to do. It's not the route we had in mind. The tanker ban is still in place, and all of the environmental ideology that's behind this is probably going to drive up the cost of Canadian oil, which makes it then less competitive. The advantage we have now, we won't have soon. And that's very, very frustrating because we need this to work. This has got to drive money into the Canadian coffers, and frankly, I don't see how it's going to do that in short order. It looks like it's going to cost the taxpayers $44 billion. $44 billion. Where's that money coming from? Somebody's got to sit down and add up all the spending that this government has announced and ask, how much longer can we do this? Spend at this rate without a massive tax increase coming? Because, friends, I don't see any other way. We can't keep spending like this and adding to our debt, piling on the deficit, and not create some new form of revenue that's tangible. The only other way the government can do that is to raise taxes. And I know they don't want to. Would they actually let the country go bankrupt rather than raise taxes? They know that would be the end of them as a government if they do. I just don't see any other way, and I'm afraid that that's probably what's coming. I want to play for you a couple of clips of the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra. Over the weekend, the Americans celebrated the 4th of July and their 250th birthday. Man, America does not understand modesty in any way. Holy cow. President Trump was the one who authorized the fireworks in Washington, D.C. I'm told that a typical fireworks show for the 4th of July would include about 20,000 fireworks. 20,000 of them. Well, in this case, fireworks were being lit off at 80 different locations. They lit 850,000 in Washington alone. Millions and millions and millions of dollars literally set on fire this weekend because they wanted to have a party. Hey, okay, fine. I mean, it's their business. It doesn't really matter what Canadians think about that. If you're an American, I don't want to offend you by interfering in your politics. But, I mean, you guys have got your problems, too. Maybe you should be a little more responsible with your money. I can't think of a bigger waste than fireworks, to be honest with you. Get the drones. Those drone shows are amazing. The fireworks, though, holy cow. Anyway, over the weekend, the Americans did celebrate the 4th of July, and I'm going to play for you a number of different clips of the U.S. ambassador doing media interviews in honor of America's Independence Day. This is Pete Hoekstra talking to the CBC. This one is about a minute long.
Okay, for the last 14 months, Canada has continued predictably to have 85% of its trade with the United States come across the border tariff-free. Predictably, the United States has carried the burden on defense of North America, as your Prime Minister says, not as America says, but your Prime Minister says, since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Predictability? That's 37 years.
Right, but tell the aluminum industry, the steel industry.
And the steps that we're taking under aluminum and steel and these types of things are allowable provisions, predictable actions if we believe there are unfair trade practices under USMCA CUSMA. Those are lawful within the framework of the agreement. Steps that somebody who believes they are being aggrieved through the process, those are steps that are outlined that a country can take. Canada could take those steps. Mexico could take those steps. In this case, the United States have.
Okay, that's fair. Hey, they are allowed to do that. It is within the framework. He's absolutely right. I realize those steel and aluminum tariffs are a real annoyance to the regular Canadians, and they are serious to people who work in the industry. What I don't understand is if Canada is building Canada strong, like I keep hearing everywhere, it's on commercials all the time. Canada strong, build Canada strong. How do we even have any steel that we can export to America? Shouldn't we be using it all here for the amount of building that we're supposed to be doing for Canada strong? I would think that this is a solvable problem while we get this worked out with the Americans. By the way, the steel and aluminum tariffs, I know they're an issue. In that clip, he also talked about defense. One of the arguments that the Americans make about the Canada-U.S. relationship is they've been carrying the bulk of the burden of defending North America. How do you feel about that? Ask yourself, is that true? Let me give you an example. And yes, by the way, the ambassador is quite right. It was Mark Carney who acknowledged the Americans have been carrying the burden of defense since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Why is that? Well, as everyone knows, Canada, for many years, underspent. We did not meet our 2.5% or 2% of GDP NATO spending targets. We don't have a military that is capable of defending our country right now. That's just a sad fact. It's sad. Now, we're going to try and work on it, but it's going to take decades to get us to a place where the Canadian Armed Forces could respond and repel any threat if, for whatever reason, the Chinese or the Russians came over the poles and started trying to take over the Arctic or try to take over one of our provinces. We're just not there yet. We have no way of defending ourselves. We would need the Americans and NATO to defend us. Is that a fair comparison that the Americans, because they did meet their spending targets and then some, because they did and they would protect Canada if they ever had to, does that mean they carried the burden of the defense spending? I guess it depends on your bend. I don't see it any other way. We were totally irresponsible just counting on someone else to defend us. We spent our money on other things, and now, well, the note's being pulled. We've been called out on it, and now we have to step up in a huge way. And now, by the way, it's not the 2% or 2.5%, it's 5% by 2030. We'll be spending over $100 billion a year on defense. That's nuts. You know, the Americans feel like we've been ripping them off, like we've been taking advantage of them in that aspect. When it comes to trade, they want to trade balance. You know, they're allowed to put in the steel and aluminum tariffs if they feel that part of CUSMA isn't working out equally. Well, they'll probably point to supply management. I don't know how many people really care about the dairy farming industry. I don't know if this is a hot button issue, but it clearly is for American dairy farmers. We can fix this. We just got to sit down and talk it out and come to a reasonable conclusion. Because the Americans have got lots of great examples of how they think Canada is ripping them off or how the imbalance is real. And I don't know what to argue with them about. I can't put something forward and say, well, no, that's not true because of this. They might be right. And it's possible I might not understand all of the different aspects that go into it. But when you look at what the Americans say are trade irritants, things like digital service taxes, supply management, particularly for farming, things like that, there might be an imbalance that we have to address here. That was part of the reason that we renegotiated NAFTA and came up with CUSMA in the first place. And by the way, we were totally opposed to renegotiating NAFTA. We dug our heels in and said, no way, we don't want to do it. Well, after CUSMA got renegotiated, we were happy. We're still raving about what a great deal it is. I don't think it's a bad idea to re-examine these trade agreements from time to time to make sure that they're working for everybody. Anyway, a bit of a rant there. That's just what's on my mind when it comes to the Americans and the imbalance that they see and why they invoked the steel and aluminum tariffs. Here's another one from the ambassador, though, talking about the anti-American campaign coming out of Canada. Still, a year later. This is about 30 seconds long.
You know, foreign countries do not go into other countries and do political ads. Advocating for certain candidates, especially during an election season. Canada decided to do that in the United States. As far as I can tell, and I've talked to historians and all of that, it's probably the first time in American history that a foreign country came into the United States of America and tried to influence our politics and our policies through electioneering.
I don't know if that is true. I don't know if we're the only country that's ever done it. I have to think that there is probably election interference from a lot of different places in America, just like we have here in Canada. There's a lot of people that have a vested interest in a certain party winning, and I have no doubt that there is definitely some influence campaigns going on. But we were brazen about it. I mean, we were buying time on U.S. broadcasters to target U.S. viewers to try and turn them against their politicians. That might be a fair assessment from the U.S. ambassador. And by the way, even if you don't think that's a fair comparison, if you just think that's just regular lobbying, that's fair game. We can run commercials down there in America to promote our agenda. Maybe you think that. Keep in mind, Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, actually threatened to go to America and knock on doors campaigning for Democrats in the U.S. midterm elections. There's no gray area there. There's no way to deny that is obvious interference in the political system in America. Let me get to one more, maybe a couple more actually, from the ambassador. I enjoy hearing the American perspective, and when it comes to the U.S. administration, Pete Hoekstra in Canada speaks for Donald Trump. He's the ambassador. Here's another one talking about oil. We're talking a lot about a pipeline. We're going to build a pipeline, another one, right beside the existing pipeline out to the Vancouver coast. Okay. What about doing more trade with America? What about sending more of our oil down there via pipelines, have them refine it, and start supplying the whole world with gas? Here's what the Americans think of that.
Again, Canada is a logical supplier for that. We've got the infrastructure, both in pipelines. We've got the infrastructure and business relationships working together. You know, we think Alberta might be the ideal place to get and fill those requirements, fill those needs that we believe that we have. But at the same time, if we can't strike a deal with Alberta, we will go to other places in the world and we'll find other sources of oil.
Okay. The ambassador, I guess, I didn't hear the whole clip. I didn't see that whole part, but that was, again, him speaking to the CBC. Are we prioritizing getting oil out to the rest of the world, and is that in some way impacting the Americans? I.e., if Canada starts shipping its oil off to Asia and Europe and places like that, does that mean less oil for the Americans? Because what they're saying is they're not going to wait. If they need oil and Canada can't produce, they're going to get it from somewhere else. Should we maybe be thinking about building another pipeline down to America? Should we maybe go splits with them on a pipeline to get the oil out to the East Coast so we can send it off to Europe and it can supply the eastern half of Canada and America? Something to consider. Something to consider. Let's do another one. This is Ezra Levant from Rebel News. He was at the ambassador's residence because he threw a big 4th of July party. Here is Ezra speaking to the ambassador on Independence Day.
What message would you have for Canadians on how to strengthen the relationship between our two countries? Because there's been some stress over the last year. I've seen a flourishing of anti-Americanism that I do not like, and I can only imagine how painful it is to be you and to face that anti-Americanism. What's your hope or advice for the year ahead?
I think our best days can be ahead of us. I'm not guaranteeing that. I know they are for the United States. Okay, it's America first. That's the direction we're going to go. We know what we need to do to stay strong, to bring prosperity, safety, and security to the American people. That's the mission that Donald Trump has put us on. We think that Canada can play a strong role in bringing prosperity, safety, and security to both sides of the border. We've demonstrated that over the last 20 or 30 years. If you want to reassess the relationship with the United States, whether it's the economic relationship, whether it is the military relationship, you're more than welcome to do that. I mean, that's what sovereign countries do. If you pick a path that aligns with the United States, you're very, very welcome. We look forward to that partnership and building on all of the success that we've done over the last number of years. If you decide to go in a different direction, we wish you all of the best. That's not where we want you to go, but we recognize that is a debate that Canada is having as to, whether there's a rupture, which means you have to look for new economic partners at the expense of the United States, that you're going to do defense on your own. Those are hard. Those are hard. But if that's the direction we want to go, we recognize that that's a decision that you can make.
Interesting. He's saying the ball's in our court. We can fix this. We can find a path forward that's great for them and great for us. But we've got to dial back some of the rhetoric, I get it, though. There's a lot of people who are probably just fine doing something with America, but they don't like Donald Trump. And I get it. I totally do. I know there's a lot of people who have been put off by the president and some of the things that he's been saying over the last year. I get it. But at some point, you got to figure out what it is we want as an end game and start working towards it. I deal with a ton of people that I do not like. I don't even mind saying it. I deal with people all the time where if I had a choice and I didn't really need that business, I wouldn't be dealing with them. But I do because it's good for business. Let's get to two more here, actually. A couple more clips. Steven Guilbeault is the former Environment Minister here in Canada. He has since announced that he is leaving the Liberal caucus. He is opposed to anything to do with fossil fuels. He is warning Canadians about this pipeline.
In terms of the overall announcement, we're announcing at a time where we're seeing record temperatures, heat waves in northeastern North America, in southern France, in more than 59 degrees Celsius at the thermometer before humidity in southern Pakistan. We're saying we're going to fuel more climate change. I mean, that's not what we said, but that's basically what we're doing. When Canada and Alberta signed the MOU just 7 months ago, we said if there's a pipeline, it's going to be paid for by the private sector. It's not paid for by the private sector. Canadian taxpayers are going to be on the hook for tens of billions of dollars for yet another fossil fuel infrastructure, which we don't know whether or not it will be profitable in the long term. With all due respect to the Prime Minister, who said, wonderful, TMX is generating $1 billion of revenue, it's going to social programs. We will make money with TMX maybe 34 years from now, because that's what the cost of the pipeline was, $34 billion. So it's hard to see where there's a good news there for Canadians.
Wow. I don't agree with Steven Guilbeault on almost anything. I don't. But I certainly respect the position he has taken. He believes the climate is changing because we are using way too many fossil fuels, and he believes that we've got to stop that and change the path that we're on, and he believes the way to do that is through taxation. Well, I disagree with that, and I will never, ever support a carbon tax. However, I respect his opinion. He's standing by his convictions, it seems anyway, and he's right. He's calling out the Prime Minister. Which side do you feel you are more beholden to? Take away the environmental ideology. Just talk about the practicality of this pipeline. It's about $44 billion. We were told this was going to be a private sector investment. It's going to generate a ton of money for the Canadian economy, but there's no risk for the taxpayers because the private sector is going to do it. Now the private sector has a very small stake, and I still want to know what guarantees we gave Pembina and what guarantees are on the table for other private companies that may want to invest in pipeline infrastructure for Canada. We got to pick a path here. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I feel about it. I'm very, very conflicted about this because when I thought we agreed that we needed to build a pipeline, I thought it was going to be a hell of a lot faster than this, and I thought it was going to be done a very different way. My friends, before I wrap things up, I want to get to a little bit of the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre. Right now, he is out in Alberta. Over the weekend, the annual Calgary Stampede kicked off, and Pierre Poilievre was delivering a message to those who were at the Stampede.
Why not let the builder build, the worker work, the investor invest, the farmer farm, the trucker truck, the manufacturer manufacture? The answer is because then there would be no role for the Liberal politician. No power, no control, no permit to authorize, no check to hand out. If you could just launch a business, produce resources, grow food, build homes, then the Prime Minister and his club of insiders would be irrelevant within their castle walls. And that brings us to why we are Conservatives. We do not want to run people's lives. In fact, if we were founding a new political party, and we're not, but if we were, it would be called the Mind Your Own Damn Business Party, wouldn't it? We want to fight to give power back to the common people, for the many, not the few, to put money back in people's pockets, control in their hands, and hope in their lives, to get the government out of the way, off the backs and by the sides of those who work hard, pay their taxes, and play by the rules. We have three main priorities: affordability, affordability, and affordability. The government is the single biggest and fastest growing cost in people's lives. People spend more on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined. And that does not include the indirect inflation tax. We are fighting government waste and overspending. We're fighting to cut bureaucracy, consultants, and corporate welfare, to end the handouts to fake and phony refugees, to cut foreign aid, because it's time we took care of our own people right here in this country. We're fighting to end the $90 billion Alto rail catastrophe, which seeks to send the money of Alberta taxpayers for a train that, if it ever gets built at all 15 years from now, 95% of Canadians will not even use, and a joint multi-partisan study showed will not take a single car off any highway, will just take people out of money-making airplanes and put them into money-losing trains. We'd rather put that money in your pocket. With savings that we get from cancelling these wasteful projects, we will use to bring down debt, taxes, and inflation so Canadians can afford a great life. We'll end the GST on used vehicles, We'll fight to cancel all gas taxes for the rest of the year, and we'll permanently end the industrial carbon tax so that we can grow more of our energy production.
Ambitious plan from Pierre Poilievre, but I wanted you to hear that because you know what? You don't get that kind of messaging on the news. They didn't dedicate any time on the news last night to telling you what the Conservatives want to do to try and make your life more affordable. They don't on the news tell you how much the Conservatives want to cut your taxes, how much and how quickly they want to just axe the Alto high-speed rail altogether. They don't talk about the Conservative plan to make the streets safer. But we should hear about it, and we should debate these things. Well, step one is knowledge. A lot of people don't even know what the Conservative plan is because all they get beat over the head with is the Liberal plan and Liberal talking points. My friends, that's going to do it for me. Tomorrow, it's going to be mainly about the Prime Minister and this announcement about the submarines that we're buying today, and whatever else comes up today, I will have for you tomorrow on Scott Fox After 9. I also might dedicate a little bit of time to talking about the Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce wedding. What a to-do that was. $20 million for a wedding. And I'm going to say that was probably just a small investment because it's going to make a fortune when they sell the rights to it to Netflix or Disney Plus or someone like that. Anyway, we'll get to that. Have yourselves a great one and check back in about 24 hours for another brand new episode of After 9. I'll leave you now with Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now.